It's time for Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla. Stay tuned for insights, impact, and inspiration right here on Channel Africa. Available on the Channel Africa app.
That is exactly what we bring you here on Africa World Hour, insights, impact, and of course, that's all in 60 minutes, looking at developments from the heart of Africa to all corners of the globe. Welcome to it. I am Tsepiso Makwetla. We also bring you the views, the voices, and the perspectives that matter, and that means your perspective. Plus 2763 406 9126 is where you can share yours on the various stories that we're covering today. Let's start with your headlines this evening.
1 hour, one continent, one voice. Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
And today we tell you about China reaffirming its strong support for South Africa's presidency of the G20 following reports that the United States has withdrawn from the upcoming summit. Speaking at the launch of a new book titled Xi Jinping and the Global South in Pretoria, authored by Professor David Munyai from the University of Johannesburg, Chinese ambassador to South Africa, Wu Peng, said Beijing confirmed that senior Chinese leaders will indeed attend the historic gathering here in South Africa. Channel Africa's reporter Michael Mbewe was there.
As South Africa's G20 Leaders Summit draws nearer, the Chinese ambassador to South Africa, Wu Peng, has emphasized China's unwavering support for South Africa's G20 presidency, describing it as a pivotal moment for the Global South to assert its influence on global governance, despite reports of the United States withdrawing from the summit. Held under the theme Solidarity, Equality and Sustainability, this will be the first ever G20 summit to be held on the African continent.
And former Congolese rebel leader Roger Lumbala has gone on trial in France, where he's accused of committing crimes against humanity in the Democratic Republic of Congo. That's more than 2 decades ago. He, if found guilty, faces life in prison. The BBC's Steve Jackson has more of those details.
Roger Lumbala founded and led an armed group backed by Uganda, which fought government forces during the Second Congo War. His rebels were accused of killings, rape, mutilating their victims, and also pillaging the resource-rich area of Beni. Prosecutors say they targeted women from the Nande and Bambuti Pygmy ethnic groups in particular. He was arrested in France nearly 5 years ago and is being tried under the country's universal jurisdiction laws. With conflict continuing in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo, human rights groups hope this case will act as a deterrent to the warring parties of today.
Pakistan's defense minister says his country cannot rule out taking action in Afghanistan. His comments follow an explosion outside a courthouse in Islamabad. Authorities said the explosion killed 12 people and wounded 27 others and marked the first strike on civilians in the city in a decade. The BBC's Caroline Davies has the latest.
We've had quite strong accusations from Pakistan's political leadership, levying accusations at both India and Afghanistan. We have heard this fairly regularly from Pakistan. They often refer to what they call Indian proxies that they say operate on Afghan soil. We have also heard from India. They called Pakistani's leadership delirious. In general, the Taliban government has denied Pakistan's accusation that they harbour militant groups that conduct attacks inside Pakistan.
Ukraine has suspended its justice minister as part of the major criminal investigation into corruption in the energy sector. It comes a day after prosecutors accused a close ally of President Volodymyr Zelensky of orchestrating a massive $100 million embezzlement scheme. The BBC's James Landale reports.
Among those being investigated are the former energy minister, Herman Halushenko, who was suspended from his current post as justice minister. Another suspect is Timur Mindic, a businessman ally of President Zelensky, who's fled the country. The allegations come as many Ukrainians suffer lengthy power cuts due to Russian attacks. People have already voiced their anger on social media about the scandal, which threatens public trust in the government.
And finally, a Zimbabwean politician and his uncle are expected to appear before the Pretoria Magistrates Court for a bail application on charges of being in possession of explosives. National Prosecuting Authority spokesperson in Gauteng, Lumka Mahanjana, says 53-year-old Job Sikala and 78-year-old Alexander Tema were detained after being found with 26 blasting cartridges.
It is alleged that on the 6th of November 2025, the two accused were stopped by police while driving along Hosimamburo Street. When the police searched the car, they found 26 units of blasting cartridge and 15 units of connector cap fuses. In court, the matter was postponed to the 13th of November for a formal bail application. The two are remanded in custody.
Tsepiso Makwetla winds it down on Africa World Hour, 9 to 10 p.m.
Now, democracy and human rights in East Africa are once again under scrutiny from Tanzania's disputed elections and Uganda's violent crackdown on the opposition to Kenya's own struggles with police brutality during protests. To speak about these developments, what they mean for the region, Channel Africa's Nairobi correspondent Daniel Ominde spoke to Kenyan human rights defender Mwanase Ahmed.
In recent months, East Africa has witnessed growing concerns about democracy and human rights, from opposition candidates being barred in Tanzania's just concluded elections to violent crackdowns in Uganda and the use of force against peaceful protesters there in Kenya. As the region heads into another election cycle, questions are being posed about the future of civic space and accountability. The human rights defender Manasseh Ahmed help us unpack the state of democracy and human rights in East Africa. Just starting us off, looking at the recent events, we've just concluded the elections period in Tanzania. We've seen opposition candidates, the main ones, being barred from that elections. After that, there was the follow-up aftermath with violent crackdowns against protesters in Tanzania. We've also seen violent crackdowns in Uganda and the use of lethal force against protesters in Kenya that happened last year during the anti-finance bill demonstration, but also even during this year, during the protests against police brutality and the Saba Saba protest. Many observers looking at East Africa believe that the region is experiencing democratic regression. From where you sit, what does it say about the current state of democracy and civic space in our region?
Thank you. I think the first thing is just to be clear that I would not call what happened in Tanzania an election. An election requires there to be a free and fair civic space and participation from also opposition. So to answer your question more broadly, I would say that the freedoms that all of us enjoy today, the evasive freedoms that have been so fought for historically over periods of, from colonialism, for multi-party democracy, for our constitution, and that's from a Kenyan perspective. Those are very quickly slipping away, both through the suspension of rule of law, the suspension of the constitution and neglect to rule of law, and complete impunity for the perpetrators of crime and those who do violate the laws that are meant to be guiding our civic space and our democracy. We're seeing patterns being carried across borders, and we're seeing a lot of collaboration between these authoritarian regimes and rulers for many, many, many years has been murdering, disappearing, torturing dissent, holding people on trumped up charges, some of which are never seen again. We see the judiciary not working effectively. What happened in Tanzania, where you saw ballot stuffing, you saw pre-stuffed ballots in favor of Samia being transported, you saw empty polling stations, observers not being accredited and allowed entry and allowed access, and being kicked out of the polling stations for those who got there, some being intimidated from military. We saw no media being accredited to come in, internet shutdowns, blackout, and a complete lie, because there's no way, if you look historically at the voting numbers from Tanzania, that Suluhu got 32 million votes when nobody was voting, and there's 37 million registered voters, and you could see the polling stations were empty. And if you compare those who have won in past elections and how the vote's been divided, it was clear that that was impossible.
In this context, we have regional frameworks like the East Africa Community and the Africa Charter for Democracy, elections and governance. Yet, these violations keep happening. Why do you think regional institutions have been so silent or even ineffective in holding member states accountable for human rights abuses?
I think a lot of these organizations are non-functional and are also captured. They become puppets of the same regimes and dictators. So we are dealing with a very corrupt system that has trickled into the African Union, the East African Court of Justice. What happened in Tanzania, as you brought up in your introduction, opens a pathway and a door for Uganda, which is already completely brutal, and then onto Kenya. And if this is allowed, it sets a really bad precedent, and none of us are willing to stand by and allow that to happen.
The struggle for democracy and human rights in East Africa is far from over. But as Manasseh Ahmed reminds us, silence is never an option. Daniel Ominde, reporting for Channel Africa from Nairobi.
And we continue with more developments here on Africa World. Our special criminal court has sentenced Sylvia Bongo Ondimba, the former First Lady of Gabon, and her son, Noureddin Bongo Valentin, to 20 years in prison. That's after a 2-day corruption trial. The pair were found guilty of years in prison. After a 2-day corruption trial, the pair were found guilty of money laundering, embezzlement, forgery and concealment of public funds, charges stemming from a vast financial network allegedly used to divert hundreds of millions of dollars in state resources. We're joined now by a member of Gabon civil society, Ivan Dessouli, who speaks to us about the developments and their significance. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us.
Good evening. Thanks for having me.
Let's just first start with the Bongo family and their vast influence, and as we have mentioned, their financial network. I know it certainly has even reached its tentacles here in South Africa. Just tell us a little bit more about what we're seeing here and the implications.
And you must know that Sylvia Bongo Ondimba, the former First Lady, and her son, Noureddin Bongo Valentin, they were arrested 2 years ago after the coup that happened in Gabon after the 30th of August 2023. They were accused of forging, usurpation of title. They were accused of stealing money, looting public fund and so on. So, and after 2 years of detention, the trial was supposed to started on Monday, on the 10th of November. And the trial was resolved as quickly as possible. As we know, that there was release on a provisional release, due to illness, and they refused to come back to attend the trial. And so the case went in absentia. They couldn't attend it. They never accept to have independent counsel to represent them. So the case is closed. The argument closed yesterday, and the sentence was given. So the sentence, as you said before, it was 20 years in prison and to pay back the state more than 100,000 million francs CFA.
But I was just saying, if you could just give us a sense of the largesse and how they used it, because often a lot of African, certainly dictators, is what Bongo was described as, and how he used state funds. If you could just give us a picture of what they were doing, where they were doing, how long they've been doing it.
And it's going to be difficult to put all the despotic regime, all the fault that the despotic regime did on Sylvia Bongo and her son. Because you must remember that case talking about only when Ali Bongo got a stroke. Just after that, Ali Bongo got a stroke in 2018. Just after that, that's when Sylvia Bongo and her son came in power mostly, while they were most seen next to the president, and they were accused even forging his signature. They were taking his responsibility without having any mandate from the people. That's where it's coming from for the specific cases. If you're going to have a trial of a regime of Bongo father to the son, Ali Bongo, we're talking about 56 years. And all of that can't be put on Sylvia Anderson. We must have a trial for the whole situation from 1968 till now, when the president was ousted in 2023. So we can't really put all the blame on them for the 56 years, as I say it. There's just been trial for those 5 years in power, where there was getting in power. When Noureddin got his first public function, as he was a general coordinator of president affairs. That's where he started to be in front of office. Beside that, he was not dead. He was even young. Can you see? He was born, if I'm not mistaken, he was 1994. So he's mostly 31 years old. And you can't put 56 years of despotic, chaotic management of a country to a young guy like that, even his mother.
So are you saying their proximity to power during Bongo's time did not lead to unfair accrual or even nefarious accrual of state funds? Are you saying it's only during the time, 5 years that you put it, that you say they were responsible for corrupt actions? And is that your opinion, or is that also what the courts found?
No, that's my opinion on the case that is put on us. Because in that case, we're not going on a trial of 56 years of the regime of Omar Bongo and his son. We just only talking about the money that was looted during Ali Bongo time. Ali Bongo spent 14 years in power, from 2009 to 2023, when he took after his father. So if you want to put them all the responsibility for the looting of money and so on, there's a thing that's most important to understand. There was not having any public responsibility. There's no, in the constitution even, there's not recognized the first lady title. And the son even. Besides that, the dictator in Africa mostly, when they're in power, we're talking about the family getting advantages from that. But there's other people, there's budget director, accountant, those who take responsibilities from department of the country, who are those that permitted to have that money taken from public institution. You can't only just put them with all the blame. If they are to be blamed, we must also call those who were in power at this time. So all of them, they must go on trial, and everyone must speak or must defend himself on when that money was taken, what was taken, and when, and so on.
And that's what I did ask in the beginning, if you could please explain to us about the extent of the financial network and how they benefited, how they used it. If we are talking about money laundering, embezzlement, forgery, and from what you're arguing, you are saying that they had nothing to do with the handing over of power from father to the family legacy of autocracy in the country. But as I was saying, that nepotism surely did not occur in a vacuum.
Yeah, absolutely. There's nepotism. As I said, they were benefiting from everything. From when you talk about autocracy, mostly even those who are not in power have some kind of, line of command on those who are, let's say, from ministers, from public figure, those who are director of budget, accountant of the treasury, and so on. So they were using their position as a proximity with Ali Bongo, the president, to give orders, to get money from that, and to get it to put it to their pocket. So that was mostly what was happening. If you were talking about that, you must go to the Minister of Finance, who was mostly responsible of the money of the country. You must talking about the General Treasury, the Treasury, that's where the money is kept, actually. So if the money going from the treasury to them, how this process came in, what was going on, who ordered, and at what time and when, who was signing those documents for the money to be taken from public government to a private pocket. So there's a lot to be understood on that thing, and the trial didn't go through all those questions.
So that's also what I'm trying to establish. So are you suggesting that the trial did not bring up this information, that it was not transparent, and are you also then suggesting that the findings are unfair?
Yeah, but if the trial going on 2 days and after 2 days you get a sentence, it means that for all the money they have been accused of looting, we can't be discussing it in 2 days. That's not possible at all. So after even 2 months of expecting or what was happening and so on, even in 2 days we can't discuss all the proof. We can't put on the table all the proof that they were looting all the kind of money. That's not possible to do. So in 2 days' time we can't go through all the questions to know who did what at what time. That's what's most important to know. We don't have the time when the money was taken. We don't have the day where that money was taken exactly. We are just saying that money was coming from the national treasury to their pocket. At which rate? So it was every month they was taking something, or after some project was done, or there's a lot of questions to be asked on that. We don't have all the answer. So.
And who do you think then is responsible? Are you suggesting that the judiciary is complicit, or is it the junta itself that you feel is oppressing them?
I don't say that the judicial system is captured, but we're talking about an autocracy for 56 years. So for all this time, for like half a century, more than half a century, so there's many people who are involved in that process, even by understanding the time that they were staying in power. Just by this time, you can understand that not only 2 people can do whatever they have been accused of. That's not possible. That's not unacceptable even. So the truth, or to see clear in that case, we must know who did what at what time. So
right.
we must,
Mr.
we must interrogate everyone.
I can hear you insisting on the fact that they alone cannot be responsible, and you're pointing out the fact that those who are complicit are themselves not being charged, that the court did not ventilate these issues. I'll go back to my question again. Are you suggesting that it's the judiciary that is complicit in an unfair process, because somebody has to be responsible? If you're saying these 2 individuals are bearing the brunt for only 5 years of crime.
Yeah, I will come back to something. You must remember that last week, Noureddine Bongo, when he was in detention, he captured some videos like he did that illegally. He captured some video. We saw even a video that was trending on social media where there were the judiciary system went to Ali Bongo, to the private house. They made Ali Bongo, the former president, his wife Sylvia Bongo, and his son to sign some document to granted a provisional release. And they were asking them to, even if they're going to say something about the case that's happening, they're going to pay 1 billion on francs CFA. 1 billion on francs CFA, I don't know how much is it in dollars or whatever. I didn't make a calculation, but that was the case. And we saw most video where we saw another video on social media that Noureddine decided to make it trend, so he put it on social media for the public to see. Even they went to the office of the president, the General Olingi Nguema. We saw him discussing with them about their release. Why he said that it's something they're gonna do in family, because if he was not part of a family, that thing will not happen the way it did happen. So there's a lot of question with what we saw last week and what is happening now with all the numbers that were that have been put on. So there's a lot of question to see. I don't want to put pressure or to say that the judicial system is captured or whatever. I don't want to put accusation to anyone. I want everyone to take his own responsibility to say what and when, to make the public understand more about what is happening. Because we must remember that it is mostly the first time that we're saying that the former first lady being arrested after the husband has been ousted.
All right. Thank you so much for speaking to us, Gabon Civil Society's Ivan Disuli. It brings the time to 25 minutes past 9.
Get Channel Africa on DSTV Audio Bouquet. Channel 802. 1 hour, one continent, one voice. Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla on Channel Africa, the African perspective. In this episode of Channel Africa Conversations, Peter talks to Dr. Thulisile Buddha, an academic, author, and an expert in indigenous knowledge systems. Join us for a compelling discussion on preserving African languages and traditions in the digital era. Dr. Thulisile unpacks the role of educators, explorers, and how technologies like AI can support cultural preservation, and challenges us to rethink how we honor African heritage. You can find the episode on YouTube, SABC Plus, and on our website, channelafrica.co.za. This episode is a must-listen for educators, creators, and change makers across the continent. Channel Africa, the African perspective. At the forefront, the most pressing issues on Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla.
Channel Africa. And at 26 minutes past 9, we talk about this, the COP30 Climate Summit. It's currently underway in Belém, Brazil, with a strong call for unity from the UN's top climate official. Brazil is, as host, managed to broker an early deal on the summit's agenda, steering the talks away from the potential gridlock after some developing nations push to include hot-button issues like climate finance and carbon taxes. Brazil's President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva has told the opening meeting of the UN climate talks, the world must defeat climate denialism and fight fake news, he said. To talk more about the conference, we speak now to Greenpeace political strategist Gwaile Munahing, who is at COP30. A very good evening to you, Gwaile, and thank you so much for speaking to us. So first, let's talk about the protests that have been staged there at the summit. What were they about and by whom?
Thank you so much, Tsepiso, for having me. On the protest, I'd like to say no comment. That's the position we're taking from a Greenpeace perspective.
Why is that?
It's a complex, very sensitive issue. So that we are being in the Amazon. So that's our stance at this point for now.
Okay, are you suggesting that it's something that would put you in danger if you commented on it?
Oh, not necessarily, no. It's simply just about respecting the sensitivities of where we are at the moment. All the different parties coming together to ensure that we get a good deal. So there's a lot that is quite complex about being here at this time. So there is a no comment on that regard.
It's such a pity because I'm even struggling to hear that answer, Gwaile, so that our viewers, listeners could understand it, because it's quite jarring to just simply say no comment in the context that you are at COP30, and as Greenpeace you have been known, you've got a long history of speaking out about some of these issues, but nonetheless we'll move along. So you've been at the summit now for 2 days. Can you just tell us what has happened so far, and also speak a little bit more about the absence of President Donald Trump, although I'd imagine that there's not much surprise there, particularly when we're talking about climate denialism.
Absolutely. We're here in the lawn of COP30, and we're championing multilateralism, which is about moving together. And while U.S. absence is notable, Africa cannot afford to wait. And I think the quote of if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together is resonating with all of us here, and we're pushing forward regardless, because climate action can't pause for politics. So in Belém, the outcomes that we've seen so far include the landmark Loss and Damage Fund, which was initially launched at Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt during COP27, has launched its first awaited call for funding proposal that launched yesterday here in Belém. And that's a strong signal addressing impacts for the most vulnerable countries. And these pledges have been made before at previous COPs. And these funds that have been pledged barely scratch the surface to quantify the magnitude of what is needed, but it's a start nonetheless. Secondly, we've seen funding pledges for the Congo Basin in addition to the TFFF, included by an announcement by European nations as the Leaders Summit last week, pledging over 2.5 billion for the Congo Basin as a fair direction of travel. And then lastly, on one announcement, and this happened just an hour ago, there have been developments coming out of the Just Transition Working Program. And what we're hearing is that there is a transition minerals text that's formally on the table in the draft text, and this has been proposed by several parties. And it's only day 3, and these developments illustrate that minerals issues are on track to be reflected in the COP30 outcome. Ours as civil society and NGOs is to ensure that governance of these minerals is stronger. And these are the main outcomes that have been proposed so far at COP30.
And of those 3 issues that you've mentioned, I'd imagine that language is also most important. What are you hoping for as Greenpeace? What are non-negotiables, if there are any?
Absolutely. Our mandate here at COP30 is simple. We are telling the African story, one rooted in justice, courage, and hope. And we come to COP after one of the worst climate years for Africa. 2025 has marked one of the deadliest crises in more than a decade. If we talk about our continent, in Southern Africa, Malawi, Zambia, and Zimbabwe have faced our worst drought in 20 years. In East Africa, we've seen severe flooding, which is swept through Kenya and Tanzania, as well as Burundi. Hundreds of lives have been lost, with over 700,000 people affected. And so at the heart of this COP is simple. For Africa, which contributes less than 4% to total emissions, we're still facing the most devastating impacts. And that's why we're here in Berlin. And I'll take you through Greenpeace's 3 main pushes, which is forest, fossil fuels, and finance. On forests, we're amplifying the voices of indigenous peoples and local communities from the Congo Basin, which is the 2nd largest rainforest in the world, to be recognized as custodians of the land. We're calling for a COP30 forest action plan that halts deforestation and reverses it by 2030, which was initially proposed at COP28 in Dubai. We're also demanding protection for forests and biodiversity from destructive fossil fuel projects and illegal logging, and we want direct access for finance for local communities, not top-down promises that never reach the ground. Just this week alone, as Greenpeace, we're delivering a petition signed by over 20,000 Africans and counting and handing this over to key African negotiators, urging leaders to put forest protection and people first. In addition, we're also advocating for a just energy transition, which is not only about clean technology, it's about energy access and dignity. We're calling for no new fossil fuel expansion that breaks the 1.5 limit, because for Africa, 1.5 is not just a target, it's a threshold of survival. And then lastly, on climate finance and justice, the message is simple for us here: the polluters must pay. Our continent is losing 2 to 5% of GDP every year because of climate impacts that we never created. And therefore, we're calling for progressive environmental taxes and fossil fuel profits and higher emitters to fund adaptation and recovery. Those are 3 main pushes.
All right, Kwele, thank you so much for speaking to us. Unfortunately, the line is not the best, so I'm also struggling to hear a great deal of what you're saying, but we do appreciate you taking the time to speak to us. Kwele Munaheng is with Greenpeace. He's a political strategist there. He's at COP30 in Brazil.
9 to 12 midday, Central African Time. On the move with Palisa Tau and Benjamin Mushatama.
Now, when you go to the hospital, there's medical attention that you need, and that's the only experience you're expecting to have. If you are a transgender person, sometimes those experiences can be marred by the demand of trying to understand your gender, your sexuality, and not particularly getting the assistance that you need.
One time, I was sexually abused by someone who used to live next door to my house. So when I went to the police to report, I was in a weave, I was wearing a dress, and when I got there, the police person that helped me said to me, obviously we're gonna rape you, because why do you walk around looking like trying to be a woman when you are a man? And after that, the person just walked scot-free.
How do you deal with that? Because there's a double barrel abuse there. So it's not even double barrels, there's kind of multi-dimensional forms of abuse.
I think one thing that I will tell you about trans people is we are strong, not because we want to be strong, but because we don't have an option. It is what it is. Because the struggles that we face each and every day are like unimaginable.
Keeping you on the know and on the move. Channel Africa is evolving, and so are you. Stay connected wherever you are with our brand new website and mobile app. Stream your favorite shows, catch up on African news, culture, and conversations, all at your fingertips.
Africa is just a tap away.
Your world, your stories, now on the go.
Stay connected wherever you are.
Visit channelafrica.co.za or download the Channel Africa app today. Channel Africa, the African perspective. 1 hour, one continent, one voice. Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
And we continue with the program. Israel's President Isaac Herzog has wrapped up a rare visit to the Democratic Republic of Congo. He's urging the international community to shift its gaze from what he called an obsessive focus on Israel to urgent humanitarian crises unfolding across Africa. During his stop in Kinshasa, part of a broader African tour, Herzog met with the Congolese President Felix Tshisekedi, discussing regional security, economic cooperation, and the deepening ties between Israel and Central Africa. We speak now to political commentator Kenneth Mokgatle about the significance of this visit. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us.
Evening, Tsepiso, and to the listeners of Channel Africa. Thanks for having me.
So your reading of the comment made by President Herzog when he says that there should not be an obsession about Israel, but rather look at the humanitarian crises across Africa. Does it sound more like a mind your own backyard type of comment?
Yeah, indeed. I think what he's trying to say is that African countries should exploit and use its focus on resolving its own issues, and not necessarily neglect or ignore what is happening around the world, because we know that the global world has come to be very interconnected. So there's no way that we can ignore what is happening in other regions around the world. So I think he put a lot of emphasis on what is happening in Sudan. I think in the previous 2 weeks, it has been in the news more than it has been over the years. The genocide, whether to call it genocide or not, I think that's the topic that has been discussed on what is happening there. But the decision, I think, to visit these two SADC countries, I think it's a continuation of what the state of Israel was trying to do in 2016 when its prime minister visited some East African countries. I think he visited Kenya. He also went to Ethiopia, and I think he went to Kenya to try and resuscitate, strengthen the ties between the state of Israel and those countries. So they've always viewed Africa as a very strategic region in the world to establish and strengthen relations with them, because we know that they've been alienated in the Middle East region, especially by the countries which are surrounding Israel, such as your Egypt and others. Although now through the Abraham Accords, there have been some attempts to try and strengthen or fix the relationship, to try and normalize the relations between those countries and the state of Israel.
And as you point out, you talk about the alienation, certainly when we look at relations with Africa from the African Union prism. How the Global South is coagulating, or what they're coagulating about within the face of global solidarity. There are major issues that separate Israel from Africa, but there are certain countries that are obviously bucking the trend. You mentioned Kenya. So with the Democratic Republic of Congo, what specifically, if it's not the mineral resources that Israel sees the DRC as a strategic for?
Yeah, I think as I've alluded that Israel obviously needs friends. They've always needed friends, especially in the establishment of their state in 1948. That's why when Ghana, the Gold Coast, received its independence in 1958, Golda Meir, who was at the time, who was the foreign minister of Israel, went to establish a relations with Ghana of Kwame Nkrumah, and they went to other countries such as Kenya, who later got their independence, to try and seek friendships there, and it has always been on as part of the mandate of the Foreign Ministry of Foreign Policy, to try and win the hearts and the souls of African countries, and that's what they've been doing since their establishments. And they continue to do so. So it's quite obviously that they will use everything that is at their disposal to try and win African countries. So in the sense, obviously, they will go out and seek some commonalities or similarities, such as your history of obviously the abuse that the African countries have suffered from slavery, and the Jewish people have suffered from. They have suffered from in Germany there. So that's, I think, the commonalities that they may have, and the fact that geographically they might share some boundaries because they are not far from Egypt, and Egypt also is part of Egypt is part of Africa, but they share borders with Israel, so it makes Israel part of Africa, if you like. That is why they see themselves as part of Africa, and they really would like to be part of African Union, as they had been in the past, been given the observer status. So in the DRC, they have made it clear that they are eyeing the trade and investment, digital and security and military cooperation, as well as other spheres in the society where they might both have some mutual beneficial between the DRC and Israel. So we know that the DRC have been undergoing very serious security and military troubles over the years. So obviously they might need some interventions or some form of help from Israel, as we know that Israel also experiences the same over the years, as they are trying to defend their borders over the years against the Palestinians, as we know that they have been fighting, or this impasse have existed since 1948 until today.
So how would that influence current peace talks with the DRC and Rwanda, M23, should I say, negotiations? And I'm thinking here, particularly given that they're being led by the United States, even though Israel is an ally of the United States. But the fact that Israel itself is a leader when we talk about military, security, technology, etc., does that mean we could see Israel then, come into the fore and play a role militarily?
When I saw it, because I know that Israel is very close to Rwanda, and they do have got some cooperations or partnerships in various fields. When it comes to military and security, that's where they work together. Agriculture, trade and investment, they work together a lot. So I was surprised to see them taking this offensive charm in the DRC. So for me, I think the impression that I'm having is that Israel would play the similar role that was played by Qatar, obviously to bring the two countries together and try to get a compromise or a solution to the problems of the two in trying to resolve the problems between them. So I don't think they will take a side now, because I think they need both Rwanda and the DRC for their own cause, especially in the United Nations and in other multilateral organizations where Israel always needs vote or support, as they always need support from Africa. Many African countries which have got seat in the United Nations Security Council, as we know that the DRC from next year will be occupying or presiding over a seat, a temporary seat in the United Nations Security Council. So it means that the DRC will have some level of influence in that multilateral organization. So that is why maybe we are seeing the offensive charm by Israel, obviously, to come and lobby for a support which they always need in the United Nations, like any other country which pursue its foreign policy.
All right, thank you so much for speaking to us. Kenneth Makwetla is a political commentator just reflecting on the visit by Israel's president recently to now in the Democratic Republic of Congo, but before that in Zambia.
Stay tuned to Channel Africa. Stream us on our new and updated website, channelafrica.co.za.
And as we head towards African Diaries now, we've got Shayla Dukumane in the studio joining us to talk about what we can expect. Are you doing anything rugby related? Are you channeling?
No, ma'am. I just needed a top that would allow some fresh air. You know what I mean? That's it. So there's nothing
rugby. You're coming at it with Boca energy.
No. Mm-hmm. That was last week. We are proud of the Boca for last week's win. Today we're talking all things relationship dynamics and romance, and we're starting off with main character syndrome. Have you ever heard?
No.
Main character, someone who sent us. Listen,
I've
everything.
heard the term, but I think I haven't spent. I think it implies you like you occupying a lot of space, right?
It's not just occupying space. So occupying space is probably main character energy. The syndrome is when everything in the world
is about you.
Yes. So Tsepiso is having a great show. Oh, I know. I love how I heard her. Excuse me.
Okay.
And this happening in a relationship. Can you imagine? The context is always about the two of you, but you center these things around yourself. Have you ever experienced that?
Narcissism, that's what normally people refer to it as, right?
Yes, but the new floating term is main character syndrome. And we're going to get into the crux of main character syndrome. There is a lack of empathy. So it is very similar to narcissism. And we're going to be speaking to Julian Haas, who is a therapist, who will help us distinguish the difference between the two. Because apparently there's a difference. Similar, but not the same.
Between what? The syndrome
narcissism and the syndrome. So we learn that difference. And then in the second hour of the show, we are going to be talking about situationships. Okay?
Why you smile so?
Because sometimes you don't want to be on the sheep that's going the long mile. Okay? You want to be on a sheep that's taking you around the bend, around the corner.
To Mr. Right Now.
You know what I mean? 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 2 months, it doesn't matter. And so the question we're posing to the audience this evening is, are you for the long haul, or, you know, are you comfortable with seeing how things go?
As a character?
Just as yourself in relationship.
That's what I'm saying. As a character, you would...
Do you want a long-term thing? Do you want a short-term thing? And we're asking this question because we've noticed that people are growing more comfortable in situationships. No longer is it the sketchy, dodgy thing that shouldn't happen. It's now permissible. In actual fact, it's trendy. It's, we're doing what we're doing and we'll see how it goes.
But don't you think that there's also a generational influence?
Yeah.
To that approach, that it's the younger generation that are making it more easier for people to be accepting of it. That for them, I mean, if you look back to the various terms that they coin, vibing, etc., etc., it comes from them.
Partially. I'll tell you why. So this is not me coming at the older generations, but we have seen the trend where there's stability in someone's life, right? However, they will choose to delve out of their stability and come and play with the little ones for a little bit. Okay, so this is a married man, a married woman looking for somebody, just for the interim.
Let's pick this up later because I would like to strongly argue that it's not the same thing.
Okay.
Not that I know anything about it. Just say. Right, thank you very much. Shayla Dukumana coming up with African Diaries. It is now 10 minutes to 10.
Africa World Hour. Unpacking global headlines from an African perspective.
Right, we move on now. In a major boost for Africa's health security, South Africa's BioVac Institute has unveiled a state-of-the-art vaccine laboratory in Cape Town, a milestone that significantly expands the country's capacity to develop, manufacture, and test life-saving vaccines on home soil. The new facility is part of BioVac's broader mission to strengthen Africa's vaccine self-sufficiency following lessons from the COVID-19 pandemic, when the continent struggled to secure timely vaccine access. We're now speaking to Dr. Morena Makwana, who is the CEO of BioVac, to speak about this milestone for South Africa and, of course, the African continent at large. A very good evening to you, Dr. Makwana, and thank you so much for speaking to us.
Thank you, Tsepiso, and thank you for having me on your show.
So let's contextualize where we were COVID times and where we are now.
Very good question. So when it comes to vaccine manufacturing, there are some things that unfortunately haven't changed since COVID. So when COVID hit, I think only many people actually realized that only less than 1% of vaccines are manufactured on the continent. And how did this percentage all of a sudden come up? It actually was always there, but it made itself into the public domain because vaccines were scarce, during the pandemic. And, questions were asked now, why are we there? So as we sit in 2025, that statistic hasn't changed. And it hasn't changed, but there's been a lot of work behind the scenes to try and make it change for the future. This is a long-term game in terms of building up capacity and manufacturing capacity. So whilst I'm optimistic that 1% will change in the future, at the moment, not much has changed statistic-wise. But effort-wise, there have been a lot more players in the vaccine manufacturing in Africa, in South Africa as well. So there are a lot more players, but it's a long game and it's going to take a while. So if you ask me, are we pandemic ready today? I would say, well, not to the extent that we should. But we are now starting to have the tools, and some of us in our company are trying to make a lot of effort with infrastructure or with other programs. Just as of yesterday, we launched our clinical trial for cholera, which whilst it's not a pandemic, but it's certainly an outbreak disease. And so we're getting ready for, what would be a pandemic. We just don't know when it's going to come back.
And while you're talking about that, as you say that there has been some improvement, but the statistics are still pretty much the same. But what we saw come out of the World Health Assembly, which is the breakthrough agreement on pathogen access and benefit sharing, how much does that help you go a long way, particularly in the production of vaccines from end to end?
Absolutely. Yeah. So this topic that you're referring to, Tsepiso, was not too relevant to African vaccine manufacturers before. And I'll tell you why. If you're not an end-to-end vaccine manufacturer, if you don't start from scratch, where, you start with the raw material, and that raw material in our case is either the actual raw bacteria or the virus or even the genetic code. So in 2020, when the pandemic hit, and just to remind your viewers that it obviously started in China, but when they discovered the virus, they actually sent the genetic code of that virus throughout the world. So others could actually start working on a vaccine using that genetic code. Now that genetic code was shared. So the meeting that you're referring to of the World Health Assembly this year in May was it took a long time for that negotiation to be agreed, but essentially what it says is that a country should be able to share a lot more, not only of the genetic code, but they should be able to share a lot more if, let's say, a source comes from one country. For African manufacturers, now that we are getting into end-to-end vaccine manufacture, BioVac is one of them, that topic becomes relevant because there's no point having the skills, there's no point having the facilities, but you actually can't start, you can't get the starting material, if I can put it that way. So that sharing the pandemic agreement and the pandemic accord essentially says that countries should share in the form of pandemic. They shouldn't hold, so that work can kickstart in other countries or in terms of vaccine manufacture, testing, and etc.
And I do raise that because we can't be talking about pandemic preparedness and vaccine sovereignty in parallel or opposite ends to each other. So, and there is country context, which is important to speak about the practicalities of that, of local manufacturing. So, how much more do we still need to fight as African countries if South Africa has made that breakthrough milestone now, but to make sure that other African countries are able to join the conveyor belt?
Yeah. Tsepiso, we are really at the starting end. And I mean, let's use South Africa as an example, because we are far from being where Europe, US, India, China, and Japan. We are very far from getting there. But we have the starting blocks. We have a few companies, and a lot of us are trying to make good. Now, if South Africa is at the status that I'm describing, you can imagine where other African countries are at. They're even further behind South Africa. And so this, whilst I think the vaccine manufacturing is now at least getting the limelight, is on the topic, at least even within close stakeholders, is getting the attention. What we are hoping and praying is that the discussion mustn't wane and people mustn't get tired of this discussion, because it takes years and decades to build this type of capability. What India has today was started in the 60s. The US and Europe, all of us know that the capability is always there. China has also had that. They've just accelerated just in the past 20, 30 years. So those are the type of timelines that you need. And so we do need to make sure that it's not a fashionable topic in 2025 or 2026 only. It must be topical and center in 2036, in 2046, in 2056. Because in that way will we then have the full capacity that we need. And not only for South Africa, but it will benefit the region. It will benefit in terms of skills. Our children and our future pharmacists and our future engineers don't have to go overseas. They need to find a home in terms of the biotech sector. But for health security, we do need to have our own to make sure that we are in. But it's still a long way. We're encouraged by the start. I'm not complaining about the start and the attention that is there. I'm just saying that it needs to be an ongoing discussion, not only in South Africa, but on the continent, because the continent is very far. For us to go from 1% of global production to even 10% is going to take a while. And the start is going to be very difficult. Hopefully, once you go over 10%, then, the compounding effect will then kick on. But between now and 10% is going to take a long time and a lot of effort.
So just very briefly, the AU's target of 60% vaccine production locally by 2040. From what you're saying, it sounds like a highly ambitious project. But what would we need to do to be able to capacitate ourselves to a point where we say, well, it is within the horizon?
Yeah. I think, firstly, we need to get to double digits. I do support Africa CDC in terms of that ambition. You need to have an ambition. It needs to be a stretch target, and a number had to be put up. And I'm happy with 60%. What I think we need to do by 2040, if we don't get to 60%, if we are at 15%, if we are at 20%, even if we are at 25%, it would be a huge, huge move from where we are now. And for me, success would be firstly double-digit. Success would be, are there hubs in the south of Africa, in the west, and in the east, and in the north? Not every country can manufacture vaccines. But do we have hubs that can really stand the test of time and can do end-to-end manufacture in the four corners of the continent? That, I think, would be the definition of success.
Dr. Morena Mahwane, really appreciate your time. He's the CEO of BioVac. Just speaking to us about this incredible milestone that South Africa has achieved, that BioVac Institute unveiling a state-of-the-art vaccine laboratory in Cape Town. That brings the time to exactly 10 o'clock time now for African Diaries. From us, it's good night.
Conversations that touch the heart and inspire change. Here on African Diaries, only on Channel Africa. Join us on www.channelafrica.co.za.